All right, now, good. Now we've got the sound. Sorry for that. So, hi, again. This time, I always forget how the streaming setup works because I don't stream all that often, and so now I've remembered where to turn on the microphone. So you should be able to hear me now. If at any point you hear any technical issues, loud noises, or much too soft or much too loud, that sort of thing, just let me know and in the chat, and I will do my best to fix those issues as we get there. So today, it's all about Feuillat's Méthode du jeune violoncelliste, lesson number 22. Most of you who are watching this have probably found me because you found the recordings that I did of the pieces from the Méthode du jeune violoncelliste. The way the book is set up, every page has some exercises at the top, and then a piece at the end of the page that usually covers some of the skills that you might have learned in the exercises. The book is absolutely my favorite technique book and generally technique learning book because it's so compact. You buy this one book, which is a bit pricey, but you get really all of the cello technique all in one book, and I find that really, really nice for myself as a teacher, so that I can just tell my students, hey, get this one book and you'll kind of have most of everything you need. Its one flaw is that it's really, really not enough repertoire for someone who's learning the cello. So it's not your one-stop shop for everything. It will cover all of your technique learning for your entire cello life. And when you're done with that one, he's got a book of daily exercises that I still use. That's really nice. So lesson 22 starts with some exercises in the fourth position continued. So it has started us off in the fourth position on page 20, or on lesson 20, and the way the Feuillat book is organized, this is not the same for all technique books. It teaches you the first position with first position extensions. I believe the half position also shows up before this, and then this is sort of your first real position change, is going into the fourth position. I know the Suzuki method starts with the second position. There are different schools of thought with this. I learned it this way, and I see the advantages and disadvantages to both systems, learning either with the second position first or with the fourth position first. They all have their own things. And I've even heard of cello teachers who are starting with fourth position and don't even teach the first position first. So there's everything. None of these are wrong. They're all different schools of thought, but it's important for anyone who's watching this who doesn't know the Feuillade books yet, that you know that at this point, you're a cello student who has learned first position, who has learned extended positions, who has also learned half position, and who has now had, this is going to be the third page of exercises and pieces that have to do with the fourth position. So this will usually happen after a couple of weeks of working on fourth position, that you'll get to lesson 22 and start working on the pieces, or the piece and the exercises that are on this page. Its main focus is the G major scale. That's what they say at the top of the page. But that actually comes as a second exercise. The first exercise is a pure shifting exercise. And it will go measure by measure. And the first measure goes like this. Then we'll repeat that. All of the exercises in this book, I really, really recommend not doing them all in one go. And really looking at them as single measures, single exercises. This is just the way that they're written in like sort of a line that looks like it's a line of music with just a whole bunch of repeat signs, is misleading. It's really just a way to save paper and space. But in any case, that's what I would suggest. Doing the exercise once, just figuring it out. One of the other things you can do is is there any way to change that? There probably is a way to change my mirror. Thank you. Let me see if I can change that. Possibly. I will not be able to sort this out quickly enough, but let me try one last thing, and then I will give up. How about that? That should be back to normal. Thanks for letting me know, Espo. And I will do the exercise again now that my left hand is actually my left hand and my right hand is actually my right hand. That's definitely easier to deal with then. So, when you're first doing this exercise, if you're not yet used to doing fourth position shifts, or you were just trying it for the very first time, always feel free to leave out slurs when you're learning anything for the first time. If the slurs are sort of the thing that are messing you up, then leave them out first. So feel free to just try the exercise, even with a break in between. Do the shift. Make sure it's in tune. You can double check it with the A string, because that's right next door. Just round up your finger a little bit. You can even play them at the same time if you're comfortable doing that, or play them one at a time. Always remember that you play your reference note first, and then your fingered note. If you do it the other way around, your brain will actually think that the note you played with your finger is the correct note. So it's always a good idea to use your reference note always as the first note you listen to, and then match to that. So maybe you've tried it out. And then you come back to the first position. And then you're going to want to try to put in the slur at that point, or I guess the second step would be to do it without breaks. And if you're having trouble catching that first finger, then definitely make sure that your thumb is hitting the end of your neck, and that you practice memorizing what that feels like. Everybody's cello neck ends differently. The curves are not standardized, which means that on every instrument you're going to play, this might be slightly different actually, the feeling that you get when you hit the end of the neck. Some will be closer or further away from the A that you're looking for here on the D string. And so you're going to want to just double check that. Anytime you get a new cello, it's always a good idea to go and find your fourth position, find out where it is on that cello. And then you can memorize it and use it always on that particular instrument. So once you can do that shift without breaks, then try it with the slurs. And again, be happy and excited with yourself if you do it beautifully just once. Yeah, just a single repetition that's perfect. Once you're good at doing that, then try doing one repetition, so two times in a row. And by the way, speed here is also not really all that relevant. If you need to do it slowly, do it slowly. If you can do it a little bit faster, go ahead and do it a little bit faster. But there's no speed that you have to achieve with this. I wouldn't be able to tell you, okay, you have to be able to do it at 70 BPM. You will be doing this in all sorts of ways in the future, so you'll get practice on all those things. Once you can do that exercise well, then you can go ahead and check out the next exercise, which has a dotted quarter note and an eighth note rhythm, but otherwise the same fingering. So I'll do that 2 times in a row so that the eighth note rhythm is clear also at the end of the bar. And here it's really critical to make sure your rhythm is super accurate. So I did this quite slowly, quite very comfortable tempo, because I know also we're going to be doing the double dotted notes, a double dotted quarter note and a 16th note in the next bar. So I don't want to go too quick yet. And so I'm thinking really 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and with really counting out those 3 eighth notes in the dotted quarter note so that my last eighth note at the shift is perfectly in time. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and the challenge here really is to be able to time this perfectly. At this point, maybe your shifts are not always happening exactly at the time you need them to happen or want them to happen. And so you really want to make sure that this is the point where you start to be very careful about when the shift lands, that you're landing at the exact right time, that you're starting it not too early. If you start it too early, you'll get a big slurpy slide. That was the super exaggerated version. But any variation, these are not going to be very practical for most of your pieces and repertoire that you're going to be doing. There are very few pieces that will ask for that. That would be marked in as a glissando. It's too much slidiness to be marked, to be unmarked, basically. So you really want to make sure that you're having a nice quick change to the new position. If your bow control is, we're going to talk about the bow control in a second, but if your bow control is not very good, you might find that the exercise at first sounds like this. So you do get a bit of a slide, but it's quite short. I will talk about it in a second, how to hide that slide, because you don't always want to hear your shift. You should be able to control it in both directions. We do shifts where you can hear them, and we do shifts where you should not hear them. And so we'll talk about that. It's a combination. It's going to be the bow that actually in the end takes care of that problem for us. Okay, so once you've gotten that exercise 2 times in a row beautifully, By the way, if you want to repeat more often, that you can do more than 2 times in a row each measure, that's totally fine, but I wouldn't do more than 4 repetitions in a row. If you do more than 4 repetitions in a row, usually your concentration will start to kind of flag a bit. You won't be quite as focused as you normally would have been, and you'll start making mistakes just because you've gotten a bit tired or distracted. And so I think it's always worth it to do short repetitions with little breaks in between, so that you can always gather your thoughts, analyze what you did just now, and then take a new decision. Why are you going to repeat this again? You're repeating it again because you want to essentially kind of rote memorize it. You want to get used to the motion, be able to do it without thinking too hard. But at any point, basically for me, the thing that means that I can move on to the next exercise is that I'm feeling comfortable. Like when you try a new exercise, it feels like you just barely made it. Like it's so hard that you just barely made it to the shift, and you just barely made it down. And maybe it sounds fine even, but it felt really dangerous. It felt like at any moment everything was just gonna crash and burn, and you were gonna mess up your shift. So you want to kind of practice it enough that you're starting to feel comfortable. It might still feel like a challenge, but it should feel like a challenge you're mastering, that you're getting used to it, that you feel like you can do it 2 or 3 times in a row, and you don't feel like you're about to mess it up at any point. So that takes us to exercise 3. So now you've done the quarter notes, you've done dotted quarter note, 8th note rhythm. Now we're going to do double dotted quarter note, 16th note rhythm. So 1 and 2 and... So now I've doubled the rhythm. Maybe I'll do it slow again. So both of those options would be totally appropriate. If you're feeling very comfortable, if you're generally good at playing quick notes, you can definitely play it at a quick tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4. But you can also do it at the slower tempo we had before. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, that was still wrong. 1 and 2 and... Depending on how you're counting. Okay, so again, tempo is not so important. The important thing is that the rhythms are correct, so that the relationship between the notes is the right one, that you've got a double dotted quarter note to a 16th note relationship. All of this was actually a preparation for shifting, like we do in the 4th measure of this particular exercise, directly to the 4th finger. So the idea is that by finding your reference with this 1st finger, you establish the 4th position as a whole, which helps you find a much better reference point for your 4th finger. If you shift up with just a 4th finger that exists by itself in the universe, you will probably not find the note, because that poor 4th finger, you just told it to like go out there and find that star somewhere over there. Which is very, very unclear directions. If you want something to actually go to the right place and find the right star, then you should probably give it some exact coordinates. Go exactly to this latitude and this longitude. And so when you shift to a specific position, this is the reason why we use the position system, at least in my opinion. We've organized this arm position, because every position is in itself an arm position, has absolutely nothing to do with the fingers themselves. The fingers have to come with your arm, right? Or rather, like, the fingers, the arm is attached to the hand, and the hand is attached to the fingers, or the fingers attached to the hand to the arm. So when the arm moves, guess what? Everybody moves. The hand and the fingers and everybody. Which means that when you go from 1st to 4th position, you're going from 1st arm position to 4th arm position. And you're using the hand and the fingers to help you make that even more precise. This exercise, if you're having trouble with this number 4 here, getting directly to the 4th finger, you can try essentially a sort of a ghost note variation of this exercise, where you shift to the 4th finger 4th position 1st finger, then put your fourth finger and continue the bow. So it's like you just froze in time, and then you go again to the fourth finger, just like you had done before. But then don't play the fourth finger, take it off and play the first finger. So basically you're doing one of the previous exercises, but like for example, if we did exercise 1 without playing the second note. So always silent, silent, yeah? Or exercise 2. And we don't play it. And exercise 3. So that hopefully by the time you get to this one, you can kind of get this feeling that you can go smoothly from one to the other, because you're still using the reference that you had built up from the previous exercises of the first finger as a helper note in the fourth position, and the fourth finger as a helper note in the first position. Okay. That's usually the most challenging little bit there. And then I guess there's one little last detail to add. I had a cello teacher who explained this, that we have sort of, when we do shifts, we have always the old note and the new note, and the old bow and the new bow. And sometimes these are sort of the same. So for example, in this number 4, we have, so let's break that down. That means this shift is done with the old bow. The old bow and the new one are the same because it's a slur. So on both the first note and the second note, it's the same bow. The old note is my first finger, and the new note is my fourth finger. In this case, these are not the same. Had we gone back to one of the previous exercises, where we're shifting from 1 to 1 again, then the old finger and the new finger are in fact the same number. So like I said, there you can have all the variations of this. What you want to make sure is that the old finger is the one that does the shift in this case, just kind of the way that you did in the exercises. And this would be what we call a portamento shift. So what we did was a big exaggerated exercise for the portamento shift, which is a shift that happens on the old finger and then sort of skips up to the new finger, or skips down in this case. You don't have to do a portamento shift if you don't like the way it sounds. It has a very specific sound that always sounds kind of like this. You can hide that shift a little bit more if you do this. But I feel like the portamento shift always sounds a little nice when you hear how you got there. Otherwise, you can do, I don't know what it's called, but you can do the shift with the new finger, where essentially I'm going to kind of start the shift with my first finger, put my fourth finger down in the middle, and then land on the fourth finger. So finish out the shift with my fourth finger. This, for me, it sounds a little bit more modern. The portamento shift for me sounds like a very classical solistic kind of shift, and I would do it in classical solistic kinds of playing. But because it's very loud and in your face as a shift, then it should have kind of a bit of a flair purpose to it. So I would do the portamento if you really want to do something dramatic. You'll have heard this surely in lots of Elgar concertos, for example. That's a real favorite in a lot of these shifts that are on these longer notes. But you can just as well do this, and with vibrato. Okay, cool. So at this point, you're probably wondering, well, what was that thing with the bow and hiding the slide, because mine is still sounding like this. So the most important thing is that you should know that you can never take away the sound of the shift if you're not lifting your bow up from the string or stopping the string or whatever. And if you stop the string, then your slur will no longer exist. So you have absolutely no choice. You must do the slide, and we will hear it somehow. So then what we're going to do is, if any of you have done any audio engineering, you'll know what I mean when I say this, but we're going to do essentially ducking. So what we're going to do is we're going to reduce the volume drastically, but not to zero. We're going to just reduce it a lot during the time that we do the shift, and then bring the volume right back up as soon as we're done with the shift. This happens in a really, really small amount of time. So if I don't reduce the volume, I get... Sorry, let me try that again. We always hear that slide. It's hard for me not to do the ducking. I'm so used to it. I always don't do it when I'm doing a glissando, so I tend to mix those up. Anyway, that's what happens when you don't do the ducking. We hear the shift at the speed that you do the shift, right? So if you do the ducking, what's going to happen is this. If we were to slow it down, I'm at normal speed, normal weight, then I get very light and ridiculously slow, shift, land, and then go back to the normal speed and weight. Remember that dynamic is primarily controlled by your speed. If you slow down, you will get quieter. Your weight is secondary to all of this. Your weight will help you balance out awkward speeds. So you're definitely going to want to get lighter so that you don't just get a crunch. Because when we're trying to just hide stuff, it's better to have a bit of a wispy, airy sound than it is to have a really crunchy sound. Because crunchies, we hear them and they're not part of the music. And the wispy, airy sound, our ears tend to just kind of forget it and ignore it. Also, keep in mind, we're playing acoustic instruments, and in most cases, except in maybe like a recording studio or something where you have a mic right in front of your face, as soon as you get about 1 meter away or 5 meters away, no one will hear any of those wispy sounds anymore. You can actually try this out. Just if you can have a partner play their instrument, and just try standing in different places in kind of a largish room. Stand right next to them and listen to what it sounds like. You'll hear lots of bow sounds and scratchy sounds and things like that. And as soon as you get 1 meter away, you'll hear far fewer of them. And as soon as you get 5 meters away, you'll hear like none of them. And as soon as you get like 10 meters away, you'll definitely hear pretty much nothing of all this like kind of noisiness. So one of the things that especially beginners can use to remember, or at this point you're probably intermediate players, is just remember you'll never sound as scratchy as you are right at your cello. You're getting pretty much the most raw sound you can possibly get from your instrument just because you're sitting here. And actually, if you sit just a little bit away from your cello, you already generally sound a lot better. So anytime you're not feeling so good about yourself, record yourself with the recording device not right next to you. Put it on a chair a little distance away, and you'll see all that smooth sound that you'll suddenly be creating without having changed anything. Of course, some technique things will help, but generally speaking, not. So now that I've gone on this long tangent, let's go back to the ducking. So I'm going to slow down and lighten up just as I do the shift. This will make the shift sound. If I do it too much, then my slur won't sound slurred anymore. So that's going to be the way that you measure, am I doing it enough? Well, do you hear the slide? Then that probably wasn't enough, or you started sliding way too early. And so then you try to do a little more, but you're like, but now I heard the decrescendo and the crescendo, so that was also not so good. And then you can kind of play around with that and find the amount of slide that you like to hear, the amount of ducking you kind of want to have, how much you want to hide your shift, and how little you want to slide your shift. It is some pretty fine bow control, and so I really would recommend spending a little time just playing around with that, learning how to slow down your bow speed at the drop of a hat, basically, and speed it right back up. And that a lot of times when you slow down your speed, you reduce the amount of weight that you're putting into the string at the same time. It should always kind of be connected, that you slow down and lift up your weight, because if you stay slow and heavy, you will almost always get some sort of a crunchy sound. And unless you wanted a crunchy sound, then that's not the right answer. So in most cases, we don't really like crunchy sounds. They're for very specific purposes. So just keep it in mind. Every so often you'll have, I don't know, a Halloween concert or something, heavy metal or rock music or something, and you want a bit of a distorted sound. You can definitely get lots of nasty sounds from your cello by being very heavy. And moving slowly, most importantly. Remember that weight is really only half the battle. So the next exercises continue to practice this exact same shift with different fingers. So if we get to exercise 5, we do sort of the same thing now with the second finger. And like I said, do it maximum 2 times beautifully. Or actually, your upper maximum can be up to 4 times if you really have a lot of concentration and want to have a little bit of extra practice. Take a break, think about the next exercise, and then start it as well. So here again, we had the quarter notes, now we have the dotted quarter note 8th rhythm. The preparation for the portamento kind of shift. And you can kind of go ahead and allow them to speed up that way if you want, or you can stay really metronomical. And if you want to be very consistent with your tempo throughout, then you can also put a metronome on. Most of these exercises can be done at 60 BPM is a good place to start. If that feels really, really slow, then go ahead and bring the metronome up. If you can't do it at 60 BPM, for most of these, you should probably try to work it up to 60, because I think most of the time that's sort of the ballpark that they're hoping that you can achieve. But that's my personal opinion as a teacher. That's what I do with my students. That is absolutely not some sort of a law that anyone created for cellists. There are no laws. You can do whatever you want. Okay, so now they have the crowning achievement is that in exercise 8, you can do either with the portamento or with the new finger shift. And then we do the exact same thing in exercise 9 now with the third finger. So remember, these exercises are almost always totally mathematical. Some programmer could have come up with them. We do this exercise with first finger, and then we do it with the second finger, and then we do it with the third finger, and then guess what? We're going to do it with the fourth finger. That's all they are. You can always create your own. And one of the things you can also do, by the way, that's not really written out explicitly in this book, is you can always just do any of these exercises on a different string. Just pick the same fingering. So for example, we had just done the second finger, fourth finger, exercise 8. You can just do it just as well on the other string. If you like to be able to do all the things on all the strings and have already practiced that before you run into it in a piece, feel free to take any of these exercises. This goes for pretty much the whole book, I think. If they make sense to do it on a different string, go for it. Just do the same fingering, different string. It's also great practice for learning how to be a little bit off the page and out of the book, and just paying attention to how your cello works and what does it sound like, and really focus on what the notes are, rather than just reading the page. So the next exercise is the little exercise 9. So again, we're doing the same format. First, third finger, fourth finger, fourth finger. Oh, sorry, I did it on the A string still. Let me do it the way it's written. There we go. So that's the quarter notes. Then you do the dotted quarter note 8th pattern with the same fingering. dotted quarter note 16th note pattern. And then the last exercise, number 12, is just directly to the fourth finger. Again, either with the portamento or with the new finger shift, but try to be a little bit consistent, or not just a little bit, try to be extremely consistent. Choose which one you want to do. So now I want to do the portamento, I do the portamento, both directions. And then I want to do the new finger, and then I do that also consistently in both directions. And then the last note just kind of resolves all of that. This last exercise, number 12, again, a lot of times we won't be used to hearing this particular interval. This is called the tritone. It's a diminished fourth interval. It sounds very wonky, and it was in fact banned from the church in the Middle Ages at some point. You'd have to look up the exact dates and the exact kind of Christianity that was against it for a while. But that it's a very, very dissonant interval, and that's okay. That's what it was supposed to sound like. So one of the last things that a lot of my students have trouble with, that I want to address before I go on to the next part, which is just the G major scale, is that the notes are hard to find, or they don't know what they're supposed to sound like. So you shift into the fourth position. The fourth position is still totally new and pretty scary, and it's just hard to figure out what the note is supposed to sound like. Remember that, at least in this exercise, this isn't going to be true for all of the exercises, but in the cases where it is true, you can play all of these notes in first position. So don't be afraid. If you don't know what exercise 1 is supposed to sound like, play it one time without any special shifting and anything. And then match that. This will happen a lot because all of the shifts that we do in the neck positions, they're usually, except on the A string, they're all notes that we can play on different strings with just, in a different position. So every single one of these exercises, you could have done it in first position. Or, what was it? Let's do 8. I have to make a plan before I start playing. It's just a fifth. So don't be afraid to do that. That's a great way of double checking the notes. And just as a side note, as a quickie, we won't get into this at all because it's not on this page. But if you need to find a note that's not in first position, like for example this E, just octave it down. Find the note name. It's this note. It's a lot easier sometimes to match octaves than it is to match just random notes. Like it's higher than D. Maybe you're good at that, maybe you're not. And it's good to have just a different option in your back pocket. So a lot of times this will be easy for me. But if for whatever reason today I'm having trouble hearing a whole step, which can happen, then maybe I want to try the octave also. And it just gives me a different perspective. So anytime you're kind of running into a brick wall with that and you're not finding the intonation, look for that different perspective. Try finding a different way to find that note. And usually that'll kind of solve your issue. And then on the next day, you might have the exact problem the opposite way. All right. So that sort of closes up that chapter of these first 2 lines of exercises. If you have any questions about those first 2 lines of exercises, now would be the great time to kind of write them into the chat. And then I will get to them after I've gone through these the G major scale that's coming up on the next page. Oh yeah, and then on at least on my edition of the book, it does tell us to study these exercises on other strings. I do believe they mean the exercises on the top of the page and not the one at the bottom of the page. So, like I said, don't be afraid to try it on all the strings. They're going to be different notes, but it's the same fingering pattern. So again, think like a programmer, think like literally a computer programmer, and just do, right, 1 first position, 1 fourth position, 4 fourth position, 4 first position. That's the fingering. And it will give you totally different notes. And if you really want to have the notes there, then feel free to write them out with a pen and paper, or there's MuseScore, and there are tons of like online as well as program ways to write sheet music out. So feel free to go ahead and do that. It's always a great way to improve your theory skills at the same time, and just write out your own exercises. But if you can, I still do suggest doing these by ear. It's going to give you a much more kind of a visceral sense of your instrument. You really want to be able to feel how your cello functions and kind of know within your body, within your own catalog of how the cello works, what relationship do these notes have with each other. Also the way it feels, and not just the way it looks on a page. This will really help you even with the note reading, but especially if you ever want to do any improvisation, or maybe write out, transcribe a piece that you've heard somewhere that you wanted to just play the melody. That's really going to help you a lot to be able to physically find the notes and not just read them off the page. Okay, so once you've done that, you're going to get to the G major scale. I will play it once. Okay. Yay. You might have done a G major scale at this point before, but you probably hadn't done it in 2 octaves. So this is your opportunity to know, to be able to play it in 2 octaves rather than just 1 octave. One of the things you can try is also playing off the page. Play the first octave. With actually any slurring pattern, we'll get into that in a second. And then play the second one. And so the usefulness of that exercise is, again, just if you're not really sure of your note intonation up here in the new 4th position that you haven't been doing very long, remember that you really want to try to just match the pitches. So this is going to be the same as this, and this G is going to be the next octave, right? So these octaves can be stacked up on each other, and sometimes just playing the lower octave, being sure about it, taking a break and being like, okay, do the same thing, start on this G, can kind of make that connection in your brain that makes it realize, oh, this is the same thing. So we're not just playing 16 notes all of a sudden, we're just playing 8, and then the same 8 again, but high. And being able to octave up and down freely that way, and kind of separating your sense of octaves being different notes, will help you in a lot of ways with checking intonation, and also playing pieces that may require you to octave up or down, and also just generally being able to tune maybe with other instrument players. Maybe you're a cellist who's playing in a string quartet, and you need to tune your G with the G on a viola, or the G on a violin, and that will always be 1 or 2 octaves higher than your G, almost always. And so I've noticed a lot of my students will sometimes, especially if they have really good hearing, get really bothered by the fact that it's an octave and not a unison. It's not the same note, they tell me. And so I say, yes, it's not the same note, but it's, you need to kind of associate it as being the same note. You should definitely, if you can, recognize the fact that they're different, know that this is the higher octave and that is the lower octave, but also be able to recognize that in the function of music, they should be regarded on a very similar level. They should essentially be the same and be tuned together. So that's a tangent on octaves and how they can be useful. So now you've done the scale. Again, I always believe that you don't need to play slurs the first time through if you're having trouble with slurs. For example, one of the places that always has some trouble is in the second measure. This particular, if you're getting any squeaks here, then it's probably your fourth finger that was touching the D string. Remember that on, I believe it's lesson 7 in the same book, they talk about keeping the fingers round for slurs over 2 strings. I will not get into that now. If you really want to hear about that, let me know in the comments. And I will be able to do another video like this in the future, and we could talk about lesson 7. But if you're having trouble with squeaks while you're slurring, go back to lesson 7. Look at those exercises again. Remind your hand what it needs to do. And remember that you need to do those round fingers anytime you have a slur over two strings. Otherwise, you will inevitably get some noises you didn't want to have. The other mistake is taking your finger away too quick so that you get some G string. Remember, again, look at lesson 7 again. In order to get that smooth change, your finger needs to stay down until you're completely onto the D string. Okay. Then we have the variations. This is something that you've, at this point, hopefully seen millions of times in this book, but he uses it a lot, and I will talk about it this time. The variations just mean that you should play the entire scale with these bowing patterns. And again, here, take out your computer programming mind. They want you to just think slur 2, separate 1 in this first variation. So when you get here and they've not written out the way it goes, just remember, slur 2, separate 1. Again, one of the earlier pages in the book, they've talked about uneven lengths of your bows. If you're having trouble with this exercise, go back to some of those pages that we're talking about. I will surely come up with the wrong page or lesson name. It's probably 8 or so. In any case, you definitely want, if you're having trouble with that fast one, make sure that you need to find a compromise, basically. Always a relatively slow bow, not so slow that it sounds bad, but as slow as you can for the 2 notes, so that you don't get too far in the bow. And then you can do a fast, relatively fast, not too fast so that you don't lose the sound quality, bow for the other one. So that means that this one is extra slow, that one is a little bit extra fast, and in the end, they found a compromise, you come back to the same place. That's your ideal situation. There are some teachers and schools of thought that will tell you to use the entire bow. In this speed, that sounds not so good in my opinion. It sounds a bit uncontrolled. So I would definitely, if you're going to do an entire bow, then do the whole exercise a bit slower. And if your teacher is really insisting on a faster speed, then maybe talk to them about how you can learn to play with your bow positioning, that you're really moving down a bit to do the slow notes and up a bit to do the fast notes. That's a long discussion. I don't want to get into it today because that's not the focus of this page. So again, if you'd like to hear about that, just let me know in the comments. We can talk about the lesson that goes over these uneven values, which was definitely prior to this page in the book. So your variation number 2, I will play for you as well, or no, I did do the whole scale. All right, variation number 2 is sort of the same thing, but opposite. And I'm thinking like a computer programmer. The first one was slur 2, separate 1, always in that order. And now we're gonna start with separate 1, slur 2. Same thing, flipped around. So again, compromises. I'll play the whole scale one time with the second variation. you can definitely, if you're a little uncomfortable with these particular bowing patterns, just try a different one every time you sit down to practice. I find it very difficult maybe to do just like 20 minutes of scales, especially just the same scale with a million different variations, because I start to get confused. My concentration starts to slip, and I get tired, and then I make a lot of mistakes. And I don't actually want to make lots of mistakes. So I try to do short bits of things with breaks, or at least maybe not necessarily a break where you like stop playing the cello, but just to do something else for a bit, and then come back and do this again. So you can really mix it up depending on your personal attention span. Some people are really, really, really into doing these repetitive tasks, and they kind of love the challenge of staying focused in this kind of deep focus. And some people, maybe you have good days and bad days, and other people just really have a lot of trouble getting into the deep focus state. And that's totally fine. So then just be just as flighty as your mind is. Do maybe one or two variations, maybe just one, and then switch to something else, and then come back and do the second variation, and switch to something else and come back and do the third variation. You can really, it's totally fine. There's no shame in doing one thing and then one other thing, and that's that. And then just going back and forth all the time. So just use that always. Whatever you're good at, whatever today you're good at, because you'll have days where you like get right into things, and you'll have days where you're having trouble concentrating for whatever reason, and that's totally fine. Use each day for whatever strengths it has. So let's go over the last of the 3 variations for this scale. So those are the 3 variations that they suggest on this particular page for this particular scale. If you do have the book, then you've seen quite a few scales and also quite a few variations up until this point. So flip back through your book and find maybe some of the other variations. Try those other variations now with the G2 major scale. I know that early in the book there's definitely the G scale at least once, and with the 1 octave. I think they teach it to you quite quickly near the beginning of the book. So just go back and look at any of the variations that there are for any of the scales, and just try them out with this scale if you're looking for some more challenges and more ways to practice your scales. You could maybe even bookmark some of the pages that have scales on them. My personal preference is always to pick a scale for the day. So every time or even for my practice sessions. So if I practice 2 or 3 times in one day, even if they're just short sessions, I always start with a scale, 1 scale. And most of the time I'll do a whole bunch of variations with it, some arpeggios and maybe some intervals, that sort of thing. But I could also just do the single scale if I don't have very much time. I only have like 10-15 minutes to practice, then I start with 1 scale and then get into my practicing. It helps me warm up. You can be really smart about it and always pick the scale of the piece that you're about to practice. That's always one great way to help support your piece learning, and it is something that they try to establish in this book. For example, the Larghetto von Handel at the bottom of this page is in fact in G major. So they're kind of hoping to get you into this habit of thinking about the scale of the piece, which is, in other words, the key of the piece, before you start the piece. This will always help you get used to the types of fingering patterns you can expect in that piece. And so, of course, in sections where you might have some different sharps or flats or naturals, any non-key notes, you'll have a different kind of fingering pattern for those. But for the most part, by and large, you will always have the same fingering patterns that happen in the same keys. And that's what scales are good for. Arpeggios also help because you'll notice that most of your music, most of your melodies are always using half steps, whole steps, and thirds. And sometimes they'll use fourths and fifths. But most melodies will stick to these 5 intervals for the most part, and only in very few special moments will it have sixths, sevenths or octave jumps that happen, or anything larger than an octave also, these happen a lot less, and that's because melodies are usually, they should be kind of singable. That's sort of one of the ways that you can say that a melody is easy to remember, is that you can sing it. That's just because most of us are more able to remember stuff that we can sing than stuff that we can't sing. I don't know why. There must be some literature on that topic. I remember learning it in my music history classes at some point. So, I guess one of the last things I could do, I don't see any questions. So I suppose either my explanation was very good, or no one had any questions up until now that they wanted to share. So I think I'm going to pull up my video that I did of this particular piece. And I will play along with the exercise. Because one of the things that I didn't do with this particular series of videos is I didn't record myself playing them. It would have just meant a lot more time for me. And actually, back when I started them, it was several years ago, I didn't really have a good way of filming myself, and so I did not make videos for these particular pieces. However, now I do have that option. Let's see, I kind of wanted to find the karaoke one. There we go. And all right, this might not sound quite as fantastic as it could, because I don't have that set up yet, but I'll try to do that for next time, because that seems to be something that'll make some sense for all of you guys. All right, so I'm going to start the video. It has a click. I'm going to put my desktop audio on as well, so you hear what I hear, and then we'll get started. One second. All right, let's try that again. All right, let me go back to the chat here. Cool, still no questions. Wonderful. So in this particular piece, I don't know, I'll go through a couple of the main things that some people have trouble with. We'll go backwards. One of the last things that happens in the piece is 4 measures from the end. This again, it's usually an intonation issue, and I would recommend that you do the 1 octave lower trick. That's what it's supposed to sound like, so then do back to back. And if you're having trouble with this shift, I guess remember the exercises that you were doing from here. You're shifting from the first finger, but you can kind of practice it one time, maybe with the 4th finger, so that you can also get that reference from the position. And then you can still have that shift from 1 to 1 that you would practice going forwards. Any shift that you learn, it's usually quite useful to have it in both directions. So you'd be able to shift up and then also practice shifting back down. That's one of the things that in this book is not always present. There are a lot of the exercises are kind of the most bare bones possible. They go through kind of the most essential things. But if you want to get more into the topic, then definitely go up and back down for any shift that you do, really. And to be speaking of my own personal experience, sometimes a shift I'm having trouble learning, like going up or going back down. Learning it the opposite way will actually really help me suddenly have a much better grasp of how that shift works. Somehow, looking at it from that different perspective, again, just changing your perspective, will solve some of those problems for you sometimes. It's not always going to be an answer, but it's something that's always worth a try, because it's quite easy to just practice a shift by going back and forth on it. And there I would remind you of what I was talking about in the other exercises. Anytime you're practicing shifts, anytime you're practicing anything where you're going to just repeat it twice and stop. Think about what you did, think about what went well, what didn't go so well, what you want to change, and then repeat it again. Only too often I see my students repeating things. And inevitably, after the 4th or 5th time, at the latest, things start to get really sloppy. And it's kind of unfair. I get sad for my students actually when they start repeating so often that they start messing up. Because often the first 1 or 2 or even 3 times were perfect, like really, really good. So just remember that if you've done it beautifully once, great. If you've done it beautifully twice in a row, you're awesome. If you've done it beautifully 3 times in a row, you've really learned it, because the chances of you doing something 3 times in a row perfectly are no longer luck. Yeah, 1 time, I hear you, it could just be luck. 2 times, it's already probably not going to be just luck, but sure, if you want to be really sure, do it 3 times in a row. More than that is really usually not helpful, because you'll get tired and sloppy, and unfortunately, everything, or maybe fortunately, it's both a blessing and a curse, your body will kind of learn all the motions you do, unless they hurt somehow. Your body tends not to want to do things that hurt again. But if it doesn't hurt, your body will just learn it, because it was something that you did in the past that seemed to be helpful for you. And so it just says, okay, cool, we know how to do that. And this applies just as much to your successes, the things where you say, yes, that was right, as it does to your mistakes, which is why we always say, I'm sure you've all heard it from your teachers or from people around you, that you don't want to repeat your mistakes. You want to make sure you repeat perfect repetitions. But in order to have real perfect repetitions, you want to be concentrated, you want to have prepared properly, you want to have gone through it, the motion maybe even mentally before you start it, so that you know what to expect, you know how to help yourself be successful, and then try it. And then if you have a good repetition, just 1 time, be happy with that. Cherish that. Try to remember those feelings, because like the way that felt to go up and down, or whichever motion you've happened to do, because that particular motion, that memory of the way that felt to do that, physically felt. I'm not talking about emotions here, although those can kind of help. So the way that physically felt to do that, that's what you need to save. All of the things that you do on the cello, they're always based on what you're physically feeling and with your own body. It's not so much about the cello. All right. We just put our own physical feelings onto the cello. And it's perfect for that. Some of the other spots that might give you some trouble are again the slurs over two strings. For example, there at the end of the third line in my piece. Make sure your finger is nice and round and that you don't lift it up unless you absolutely need to. In this case, you shouldn't have to lift it up at all before you go to the next bit. The other high bit that goes out of first position is that one sometimes throws some of my students for a loop because it's it's got a natural in it, so it's out of the key. It's sort of this minor borrowed key that we're going into there, and so that will sometimes sound a little weird. Again, if it sounds weird, bring it down. That note is new for you usually at this point. You've done 2, maybe 3 weeks usually at this point of fourth position exercises, but maybe you're not quite sure about the notes, about the pitching yet because your hand is not used to getting to the right spot. So try it down an octave. It's just an F and an E. And if you want, just play the whole passage down an octave. Always a nice exercise. And then do the same thing right after so that you still have it in your ear. Doing these things sort of back to back without too much time in between often helps because you can remember the way it sounded a little bit better. Exactly. So that's pretty good. That's probably about everything that I can think of out of the top of my head that and from what I had prepared from mistakes that will often happen. If you have someone who's also maybe not even your teacher who can play this with you, that's always the absolute best. To have the accompaniment there as well, or maybe even just somebody who's playing the same exact voice as you once, so that you can hear the way it sounds. I did record again this video. I'll probably, once I've uploaded this properly, put up a link somewhere over here, so that you can click to that to the video and also the karaoke version of the video. It is recorded with a metronome and either with both voices, or the karaoke version has only the accompaniment part. Depending on what you're going for, what your goals are, one could be more useful than the other. All right, so that's about it. If you like this video, please be sure to give a little like. If you've subscribed to my channel, thank you. And if you've not yet subscribed, maybe consider subscribing. I'm going to try to do a few more live streams every so often. On these kinds of topics and also other topics. I've done a couple of creative live streams where I hashed out new ideas for my upcoming album. I've done one album of cello ensemble music, and I will be doing a second one as soon as I get all the songs ready and recorded. So that'll probably happen later this year or early next year. And until then, I'll be doing some videos like this where we talk about teaching subjects, and also videos where we talk about creative things. So thanks very much for joining. And for any of you who are watching this post video, feel free to go to my website, www.natashajaffe.com. There's a contact page there, and you can just send me an email, maybe with your question, and we can have a quick talk about that. Thank you, Espo. It's really nice to see that someone was watching the entire time. I'll see the stats later, but I'm excited. So let me know in the comments also which video I should do next. This one was my most popular video, so I knew that lots of you had been working on it. Much of what I say has been, they're usually the same sorts of things, but yeah, I'm glad your teacher is telling you the same things, and I'm glad that we're all kind of on the same page here. Keep it up. And I'm excited. Maybe one of these days you guys can post your own videos of some of the Fayard pieces or the exercises, and we can hear how you guys are sounding. All right. I guess one last thing is that I'm doing an open cello class, is what I'm calling it. It's going to be a forum where you can actually play your piece for me and for some other peers. When I was in university, we always did a cello class, and once a week we would get all the cellists together with our teacher, and we would play for each other. And the nicest thing about it was that I would get comments not just from my teacher that I saw every week for a private lesson, but I would get comments from my peers, all the other students who were studying at the same university. And I think a lot of universities have this kind of system where once a week, or maybe only every once a month or something, all the cellists get together and sort of play for each other. It's an important part of learning how to get your pieces ready for performance, and also getting just new ideas and new ways to practice that maybe you hadn't thought of before. And the more heads in a room, the more eyes and ears listening, the better. So I've decided to start doing this over Zoom. And so the next Open Cello class is on September 12th, also at 6 p.m. Central European Time, which is just the same as this stream. And I already have 3 performers signed up, and observers can come as long as I've got some spots for you. I've got a Zoom Pro account, and so I can have I think up to 100 people in there. So with myself and the 3 people playing, there's still a good 90 spots to go. So feel free to come and join us and watch, and maybe another time you'll come and play. I'll try to do these once a month. All right, well, that's all for me. That's all the advertisement I could think of doing. And thanks for watching. Take care. Have a nice day, evening, morning, or whatever time it is where you are when you watch this. And thanks very much.